Jimmy Butler came back. It was weird. We're going to talk about it next.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Going solo today, my co-host David Ramil not here, recording a little bonus episode for you. Just got back from the arena where I watched the Heat lose to the Nuggets. Not a competitive game, not the headline here. The headline is that Jimmy Butler came back, returning after serving a 7-game suspension, and everybody was wondering going into this thing what it was going to look like. I'm going to tell you what it looked like. This looked like a guy who hates his job. And I'm going to tell you a little story here. I used to have a job that I hated, right? Before doing all of this, before getting full-time into the media space, I was in sales. And I had a pretty cush gig. I really did. It was a good job, paid well. I enjoyed it. And I got a new boss, and, they came down and started implementing some new things that they wanted us to do, et cetera. And I pushed back a little bit, and eventually, I got reprimanded. And after I got reprimanded, I came back and I basically did my job. We had a meeting with the bosses, the whole thing. They said, we need more from you. You're coasting a little bit. And they were right. They were absolutely right. I was coasting a little bit. It was a cush gig, and I was taking advantage of the situation a little bit. And they said, we need more from you. And I got upset. I kind of bristled at them and was stubborn. And again, I was much younger, but I was not a good employee. And after I was reprimanded, after that meeting I had with my bosses, I did work harder, but I did it reluctantly, and I wasn't happy about it. And while that was happening, I started to take interviews for new jobs, and I eventually left a few months after that. I only tell that story because this is what I saw in Jimmy Butler tonight. That's what he looked like. He looked like a guy who hates his job. He's here. He's got to pay the bills. He doesn't want to lose another $2+ million by getting suspended again, right? He doesn't want it to hurt the wallet anymore. So he's going to do the job. 18 points on 15 shots, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 0 steals, 33 minutes. Fine stat line. Better than against the Pacers, better than against the Pelicans, the 2 games prior to the suspension. You can't necessarily look at that and criticize him for not trying, for not playing hard, for all the reasons that, or at least some of the reasons that he got suspended for in the first place. You can't really accuse him of that. But I'm telling you, you watch him, and you're like, this guy doesn't want to be out there. He wasn't super involved with his teammates. He wasn't involved in the huddles. He wasn't really involved in any of the pregame stuff when everybody else is sort of dapping each other up and all these things. Was a lone wolf. Was just by himself, punching in and punching out. He did talk with the media a little bit later, or a little bit later after the game. I'll talk about that and what he said after that. But this looked like a guy who just hates his job and is doing it to pay the bills until he can get another job. And I don't think anything has changed. Jimmy Butler still wants to get traded. He would rather be working somewhere else. He wants to be working for a different company, essentially. And while he's here, he understood, okay, I was reprimanded. I had the meeting with the boss. And he played harder, like I worked a little bit harder after my punishment and meeting with the boss. But doesn't mean you got to like it. So this is a guy who is a coworker with some fellow coworkers that was just doing the stuff. So that's how he played. Thought it was fine. I thought that the Heat were playing around him more than with him, if that makes sense. Jimmy Butler didn't take a ton of shots. I think the first half, he had like 9 points or something, 0 rebounds, 0 assists, 0 steals. Finished with a couple more rebounds, a couple more assists, still no steals. Played 33 minutes. Played some fourth quarter minutes for the first time since late December. And, but again, he wasn't engaged. First play of the game, they designed a post up for him on the right block, sweet spot for him. And he got it. Ball goes out of bounds. No points on the possession. And that was it. That was really that last time that they designed to play for him, or that he called for the ball or anything like that. He didn't stand in the corner necessarily, but he was in the dunker spot a lot. He was kind of mucking up their spacing. There were points where Jaime Jaquez literally had to step around him to get to a layup. Now Jimmy did a go back door for a couple of cuts for some dunks, things like that. Like there were some moments he picked his spots, but the guy took 15 shot attempts in this game. You can almost just count from the box score how many possessions he actually cared about on the offensive end. It was those 15. Went 7 to 15. You're like, okay, he cared for about a dozen possessions for the entire game. And that's sort of the frustrating part of this, right? Is that this guy still rolled out of bed, got 18 points in a game, was the leading scorer for a lot of this game for Miami, and wasn't totally engaged. Like, again, that's the frustrating part of this. You know what this guy is capable of, and he is withholding that, right? Because he hates his job and he doesn't want to be here, and he's not going to do all of those things. He wasn't really crashing the glass for all these rebounds. He was setting screens a lot. Like, instead of standing in the corner, he basically said, I'm going to be a professional screen setter. And he was just sort of setting these pin downs for the other guys in the corner, or kind of getting into the lane and setting those screens. He's just screening. So I'll screen for you. I'll screen for you. I'll screen for you. I'm just going to be a screener. So they'll probably rank as high as Bam did in terms of total screens, that those stats that the Heat keep internally. So, he's got the 18 points, and he can go back to the Heat and say, you can't say I didn't try. This is better than the Pacers, better than what I did against the Pelicans. You can't say I didn't try. I was out here tied for second or whatever on the team in points. Tyler led the team with 22 points. I think I have all that right. But again, the game barely even mattered in this game. Yeah, he was Tyler 22 points, Jimmy second with 18 points. I mean, he outscored Bam, barely even trying. So it's just you know what this team is capable of. I said this before. I think this team could actually be good with an engaged Jimmy Butler, with some of the other options that they have. The young guys sort of growing as the season has gone on, but that is clearly out the window, because Jimmy Butler is not going to provide them that. He's not going to give them that at this point. And so, they had to play around him. They were just playing around him. And I got to the game early, talking to people, walking around the court, walking around, sort of the back of the arena. And I am telling you, the organization feels this. Like, that angst, that curiosity that we all felt going into this game. What's this going to look like? Is he going to play? Do they going to start him? Whatever. Everybody felt that. This is a cloud hanging over this organization right now. There is no question that this is a distraction, that this was bigger than the game itself, that everybody wants to know what the next thing is, because the fact is nobody knows what's going to happen between now and the February 6th trade deadline, or even after that. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Everybody's just sort of waiting. And in the meantime, you're just sort of playing around this guy who doesn't want to be here, who's going to give you the bare minimum like he did tonight. And everybody else is just sort of forced to kind of figure it out. And I don't really know what else the front office is supposed to do. There's enough time here between now and the trade deadline, so where you could be patient to a degree, right? But if there's a legitimate offer on the table between now and February 6th, this team is going to have to strongly consider it. Now, Jimmy Butler did talk about some of these trade rumors. I'm guilty of it. Should not have said rumor. These are not rumors. These are reports. These are real things, right? And before the game, Eric Spoelstra said, I don't want to get into the silly storylines. The media is looking for drama. I'm here to focus on basketball. And on one hand, I admire that from Spo. He's got a job to do. His job is to win basketball games. His job is not to feed the media machine. I understand that. And whatever you could do to sort of limit that noise and try to get it away, that's his job. That's what he's supposed to do. At the same time, these are not silly storylines, and these aren't dramatic narratives being fabricated by the media. The team president came out with 2 statements in an 8-day span, one saying we're not trading Jimmy, and then the next one saying we are listening to offers for Jimmy Butler. Like, this isn't something that was just created. This is something that your team itself, the head boss, head honcho, Pat Riley, has come out and acknowledged and said, we're going to trade this guy, or we're at least looking to trade this guy. But what does Jimmy Butler think about some of the reports that have been out there? He talked about it. We're going to talk about that next year on Locked On Heat. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate. The variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make the playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So Jimmy Butler was asked after the game, what do you make of the reporting around this situation? Because it's not just, hey, Jimmy Butler wants to be traded. He's requesting a trade. Another face-to-face meeting with Pat Riley, doubled down on his trade request. But even some of the stuff that was in the Ramona Shelburne story on ESPN, some of the stuff that's the other stuff that's been out there in terms of just his relationship with the organization may be feeling, just kind of sick of the whole Jimmy Butler experience. And he said no comment. When asked if he still wants to get traded, he said no comment. When asked basically about anything like that, he said no comment. He also said, I was told to say no comment, so no comment. But then he added something else. He said, a lot of people have been saying a lot of stuff, not me, but the truth will come out. Paraphrasing there a little bit. But he said, I'm not paraphrasing this part, the truth will come out. And so evidently, when Jimmy Butler is eventually traded or whatever happens, and he's no longer with the Miami Heat, I guess his truth will at least come out, and we'll get to hear his side of the story in one way, shape, or form. And so whatever that is, it is. But here's what I know. This is a distraction. In that locker room after the game, it wasn't the same. I'm going to take you in there. It was not the same as the locker room after the after the Pacers game. After Jimmy Butler used the press conference to say that he could not find joy on a basketball court playing in a Miami Heat uniform, essentially. That was kind of somber, awkward, quiet. This was not that. It wasn't even quiet. It was almost like there was comedic relief in there. We walk in and people are like, oh, media's here. This is going to be interesting. Various players talk, are you guys here to talk to Jimmy? Like, what's going to go on? Like, they're very aware of the situation and they're almost playing like the comedic relief here. And I find that really interesting because in moments where things are awkward or sad or whatever, I think we as just sort of humans kind of look for comedic relief in a lot of different spots. And I kind of felt that. I sensed that in that locker room, in that Heat locker room after the game. I think they're just sort of looking for some sort of chance to laugh at the entire situation because I don't know how else they're supposed to handle this as players. This is such a tough spot. Not only are you playing around this guy on the court, but this guy is in the locker room. He's made his intentions known. Like everybody in that locker room knows he wants to get traded. He doesn't want to play for that team anymore. And he doesn't want to be their teammates anymore. And Jimmy Butler said in his post-game press conference, he said, I want to point it out, again, paraphrasing, but in so many words, I want to point it out. I have no problem with these guys in the locker room. I still ride with these guys in the locker room. That's a good thing for him to say. But at the end of the day, he wants to get traded. And so that does weigh on the team, like on his teammates. As much as we want to say it's a business, it's like, well, what do we really do here? So he's been their teammate for 5.5 years for some of these guys, for Tyler and Bam specifically, but for a lot of these guys, he's been around for a long time. So that was sort of the vibe. The Heat lost this game because Denver is better. I want to point that out. They didn't lose this game because Jimmy Butler and all the distractions. They did not lose this game because of that. Maybe against the Pacers, the Pelicans, I think the Jazz the next game, even though Butler was serving suspension after everything that happened there, I was not surprised that they went out and kind of flubbed the Jazz game and then the road trip that they went on. They obviously were dealing with some of this stuff even though they were away. But the Heat lost this game because the Denver Nuggets are just a better team. They had no answer for Nikola Jokic. Jamal Murray was great in this game. Denver shot 54% from the floor. They tore up Miami's defense, back cuts, everything. Bam talked about it after the game. They need to get better all around, especially defensively. And they've actually been slipping defensively a little bit with or without Jimmy Butler. So they need to lock in on that end. So this was more than just Jimmy Butler's sort of ho-hum effort in this game. My question is, can they? I mentioned the defensive slippage. There is so much weighing on this team right now. On Bam, on Tyler, on everybody else in that locker room. There is so much weighing on this team. And as much as Eric Spoelstra wants to try to shed the storylines and get out of the drama and focus on basketball, it is so hard to do that when this cloud is hanging over the team. Like, every win right now feels kind of like a miracle, right? Like, to do that in the face of something that is relatively unprecedented. I can't think of another time your star player demanded to get traded in the middle of the season, quit on the team for 2 games, got suspended for 7, and then came back to the team and was in the starting lineup. And you had to play around him. Like, this is a weird situation for everybody involved. And that is the feeling around the organization. The feeling around the organization is, this is crazy. This is weird. When is it going to be over? There is no reconciling this between Jimmy and the Miami Heat. If anybody out there has any last bit of hope, like, good for you, man. Like, you're much more optimistic than I am. But being around the organization today, there is an understanding. When is this going to be over? And right now, this is really weird. And so you got kind of the first bandage ripped off here with the Jimmy Butler's return. Is he going? We answered a lot of questions. Is he going to start? Yes. Is he going to play a lot of minutes? Yes. Will he play in the fourth quarter? Yes. If there's a use for him, and they didn't win this game, but they put him back out there in the fourth quarter. Will it look like it did against the Pacers and the Pelicans? Not quite, right? On the scale of Pelicans, Pacers, and like round 1 against the Milwaukee Bucks, this is definitely closer to Pelicans, Pacers, but not quite as bad. And we're not going to get round 1 against the Milwaukee Bucks. And I did wonder, Jimmy Butler, Michael Jordan jersey before, the whole I'm back thing. This was not a good Michael Jordan impression, if that's what Jimmy Butler was going for. This was a lot of the fake statement from Bernie Lee on Twitter right before the game, the I'm back, Jimmy wearing the number 45 Jordan jersey, obviously a reference to when when Michael Jordan came back from his year sabbatical. He didn't really feel like he was much of Michael Jordan out there. This was a guy that was basically a role player, essentially, out there. And the Heat are going to need more from that, more from Jimmy. They're going to need him to be more than a role player. I don't know that they can expect him to be more than a role player. And so they're going to keep trudging along in whatever this weird thing is. And everybody's going to feel weird about it until it's over. And I think everybody's sort of looking forward to that. And I understand that feeling. So really weird situation. Heat lose another one. They fall back to 500. And they play the Spurs on Sunday. Victor Wembanyama comes into town. Should be fun. Sure, there's going to be more headlines, more storylines, more twists and turns, as there always is with this Jimmy Butler saga. But for now, that'll do it for us today. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.